For millennia, people have asked themselves what is best in life. And the answer, of course, is to crush your enemies, see them driven before you, and to hear the lamentations of the women. Or at least that's the answer Khorne has chosen and embraced, at least after the Omens of Destruction rework. Pre-Omens of Destruction, I wasn't too big of a fan of Khorne. I always felt it was too one-dimensional, and you were spending too much time worrying about money. Khorne counting money is like Bobby B counting coppers. It just doesn't happen. It doesn't make sense, and yet that was the campaign dynamic you were dealing with as Khorne. After the rework, ooh, this is juicy and ridiculous. Let's just put it like this. This is a pretty powerful endgame army I have over here with Arbol. The upkeep cost is 281. And in fact, there's only a handful of units that are requiring upkeep, and it's really mainly the heroes that are requiring upkeep over here. There's a couple of reasons behind this. Because while Khorne seems simple to play, there's a lot of intricate systems behind making Khorne work. First off, you have Bloodletting, which gives you casualty replenishment, reduces global recruitment, and crucially reduces your upkeep by up to minus 40%. It starts at minus 10%, goes up to minus 40%. But it's not just that. There's a number of skills as well, Lord effects, hero effects, faction effects in the case of Arbol, that further help you in terms of upkeep. And this is phenomenal because you don't really generate money as Khorne. You're not counting the coppers as Khorne. You're not sitting there as Scarbrand with a big handful of cash just thinking, okay, I need 4,000 for this army, 5,000 for that army, and all the blood toast. Yeah, I'm going to go bankrupt in like 2 turns, so I better go get out there and kill more people. To be fair, that is still the playstyle you embrace in the sense that you go kill people for money, though you don't necessarily care about the income as much. Settlements do reduce upkeep by 20%, or up to 20% at tier 3, or 20% in general. Then you have a building that further reduces it. The reason Arbol has such a low upkeep is because of various things combined. Your structures generate a pittance of money, but on the flip side, you can actually generate a good amount of money in a campaign through vassal tribute. But we'll get into that in just a moment, because suffice to say, Khorne is a bit ridiculous with respect to vassals. One of the things to be said though about Khorne, Creative Assembly has always struggled with the idea of how do we make a faction work, a race work, in a situation when what we really want to do in a campaign is have them work with a few provinces. That is kind of anathema for Total War, because Total War is about building an empire, conquering territory, building that territory up. You still want to build that territory up as Khorne, but the primary reason you conquer territory and keep it is not because of economic concerns, though, to be sure. If you get a bunch of these trophy chambers, you can boost your faction-wide income from post-battle loot and sacking and looting settlements, but primarily you're doing it for unit recruitment and hero capacity. And in essence, even in a very long Khorne campaign, you can manage with just 2 provinces. You may want to get more, but funnily enough, you're actually incentivized as Khorne to not hold more than a couple of provinces, even if you do take control of more of them. That is because of vassalization situation. But you are going to hold little territory as Khorne inherently, because every single region you conquer is going to cost you 2,500 skulls. Yes, there is a mechanic available when you raise a settlement to the ground and you capture just one region or province, you can automatically resell them, and that prevents other factions from reselling them for a couple of turns. But then it is a free-for-all. That mechanic is great, and you can use it, and you should use it. But even so, your ability to occupy settlements or to build a vast empire of territory you control is going to be limited. Your vassals, on the other hand, well, let's just say they don't have such limitations. And it ends up being a bit freaking ridiculous when you start getting people like Malekith, and working on Marathi at the moment, actually. That's the reason I went for Mazdamundi over here. Well, one of the reasons I went for Mazdamundi. There was a challenge here. I teleported to deal with it. But there are reasons why this ends up working. So even territory you do hold, you may trade some of it to another faction in order to get a lovely vassalization agreement, which grants you more unit variety, and also quite crucially, gives you their vassal income and makes you unstoppable. But here's the difference between Khorne and Warriors of Chaos, for instance, who also have a similar mechanic of being able to vassalize factions. You do this for diplomacy. You're not doing this for subjugation. So you're not fighting a faction and reducing them to almost zero and then trading away territory. In fact, doing it for diplomacy as Warriors of Chaos, because of how their territory works, their minor settlements work, is not an especially great idea. For Khorne it works because they have regular settlements. So fundamentally, what Creative Assembly has managed to achieve with Khorne is something that makes Attila the Hun in Total War Attila jealous with envy. Completely jealous, because that is precisely the playstyle that you might have with the Huns. See, the Huns burned and pillaged their way through a lot of countries, but they also made vassals of the people they conquered. They were also not above in engaging in diplomacy, if only because they were looking to extract as much money from the Byzantines or the Romans in general, or from the various people they fought. So in a way, what you're getting with Khorne is like that kind of playstyle the Mongols and Huns and Timurids should have had all along. The idea that we're going to destroy territory, we're going to conquer people, but then we're going to set up client states that are going to be loyal to us, one way or another. Again, you can't do it for subjugation, but you can pull it off through diplomacy. Obviously, it works much better with factions like the Dark Elves, Chaos, Skaven, Greenskins, but let's just put it like this. When you've got Astrogoth and Clan Molder on your side, you don't have to worry about a damn thing in your campaign at any point. After that. So that is overall a fantastic system. What you do end up having in diplomacy, what ends up working. Some will say it's too easy because you lack the risks, but this is where it's kind of brilliant for Khorne. You're strong as long as you keep fighting, keep looting. The moment that stops is the moment the party is over. So you do thrive on aggression, you do thrive on keeping the party going, but you're going to end up being hurt quite a bit if you do end up losing. If I lose this army with Arbol, it's GG, well played, campaign might as well be over. I mean, I could recover, but the road to recovery is going to be an especially painful one. So those are some things. With respect to how settlements work, you also have the split between demonic and mortal settlements. I admit this is the one thing I don't especially like with regards to Khorne, because let me say it like this. If I'm playing a Khorne campaign, I would like to get all of these units, right? Now, sure, it may not make sense to construct all of these buildings, all 5 of these buildings in a provincial capital, though realistically I could. But instead, I have to choose to go for a mortal settlement or a demonic settlement, and I'm losing out on certain things. The only thing that mortal and demonic settlements share is the domain of slaughter. Other things like the coordinate totem, the battlefields, the brass ziggurat, the foundry of skulls, and of course the arsenal and coordinate furnace are split between mortal and demonic settlements. So that is absolutely something that I don't think Creative Assembly necessarily did all that well. I understand they wanted you to specialized settlements, they wanted to make that demonic mortal settlement split work better, but ultimately the reason it doesn't work is that mortal settlements early on in a campaign are much better than demonic ones. The only reason you get demonic ones is for high-end specialist units like skull cannons, and bloodthirsters, just as some examples. Everything else, you're much better off getting mortal infantry than demonic infantry, or mortal cavalry. Cast knights with lances of Khorne or blood crushers are freaking fantastic, suffice to say, in a campaign to get. And yes, they're worth it more, or sorry, skull crushers of Khorne as opposed to blood crushers. Essentially, there's only 2 units that you care from a demonic settlement and 1 hero, whereas there's 2 heroes you care for a mortal settlement and a whole bunch more units. Still, I do think that because of Khorne's high level of growth that you do have, be it through settlements or through the ability of getting a research over here, that gives you 10 growth per region after winning a battle in all provinces, you end up with a substantial amount of growth anyway, and you only really need 2 provinces to make this work. But it could have been 1 province. I'm just saying it. It could have just been 1 province. Still, it is a great system. Then we have blood toasts and the way they work right now. So blood toasts can be generated through a whole bunch of actions like, post-battle option, for instance, or through various effects that Arbol or Skulltaker do have in their campaigns with regards to generating them. And they can be pretty powerful. They've been inherently nerfed, but there's still skill lines and research that does buff them up. There's also the cults of Khorne, which you can set up, of course, with cultists, and you can use these cults to instantly teleport your faction leader to the settlement. So Khorne inherently, as a race, has a more dynamic campaign than most other races simply because you do have that kind of teleportation available for cults. If I'm playing a Scarbrand campaign, I'm relying on cults to have a great deal of mobility around the campaign map. But if I'm playing Skulltaker or Arbol, inherently they do have faction effects that do give them the ability of teleporting around the map. Be it with Skulltaker's ability to teleport to a challenger or Arbol's ability to teleport to a challenger, and then getting a bunch of different effects as well, like summoning a blood host after completing a challenge. It ends up creating this really ridiculous gameplay loop where you're just like, especially as Arbol, you're teleporting turn after turn after turn, seeking worthy foes around the campaign map, and it is a whole bunch of fun. One might argue that it is too easy. Let me give you guys a little secret about playing Total War. Once you've gotten a certain amount of experience with the game, you'll end up dominating most campaigns. That's not the problem. The problem is the process. In some cases, it is very tedious. It is slow. It is inherently slow. It is not fun. With Khorne, it is fun. It might be faster than in some other races, absolutely. And I would appreciate actually being able to get Cast Knights or Lances, for instance, faster. But it is a process that does work. As opposed to having a campaign that limits you and slows you down and tries and slow you down, and you end up with the same result anyway. And you end up in a situation where after 20 turns you've won the campaign anyway. You have a situation where you can do a lot more things in those 20 turns and have a whole bunch more fun in the process. And that is really the brilliance of Khorne. Go out there, do shit, enjoy the game. That is fun. It's even especially fun as Arbol because you literally have endgame armies being spawned for you by the game to enjoy, to savor the challenge in this campaign. And you can make battles harder or easier depending on what you want to do. Some other things that are great about Khorne, the research tree is pretty damn fantastic. You get a bunch of different benefits in a campaign. Sure, some are better than others, like always getting a bit of hero capacity for war leaders and Reaper of Ages before focusing completely on the Pillar of Honor and getting construction time -1 turn for all buildings is great, but you also have a lot of long-term potential as well in a campaign, like improving blood toasts, be it in terms of units or improving the capability of individual units in a blood toast, giving yourself some skull benefits or skull throne benefits, improving your quote-unquote economy, so to speak. And then, of course, significant combat benefits through the armaments tree that you do have access to in Khorne campaign. So ultimately, you have scalability. It's not just a race that's oh, so dominant in the early game. That was one of the problems. The lack of scalability, the lack of diversity in a longer campaign that ended up ruining Khorne for me originally. Now you do have scalability, you do have unit variety, you do have a whole bunch of different effects over here. Though what you choose to focus on, that's up to you. Personally, I chose to focus on capturing more settlements early on, so the Skull Throne ended up being a bit neglected early on for me in my campaign, but the power is absolutely freaking there. And it is ridiculous power, culminating in summoning a Blood Host, but really I would say that Wordless Edict and Fury's Flight are substantially bigger benefits. If there was any specific complaint I would have with Khorne is that it's too focused on the idea of the faction leader's army, and secondary and tertiary armies end up suffering somewhat, though nowhere near as much as they suffered before in the way that Khorne works. You can have secondary and tertiary armies actually doing a lot of damn useful things in a campaign over here. Like, for instance, this army here helped, and I emphasize the helped aspect, defeat Malachi. And now I'm just waiting to see if they can defeat Katrin so we can burn and pillage Kislev to the ground. We'll see about that. Hilariously, if I really wanted to, I could potentially even force Katrin to bend the knee to me. I would just need to take a couple of strategic settlements, maybe get Erengrad for myself, one way or another, and get Katrin to become my vassal. That would be pretty hilarious, because you see, once a faction becomes your vassal, it might be harder with certain factions than others, but once a faction becomes your vassal, chances are they're not going to break that vassal agreement anytime soon. Like, you know, I just showed up here, beat the crap out of Gorst for a bit, and I made Greasus my vassal. And now, and Greasus has just been happily conquering a whole bunch of territory over here for quite a few turns. I just need to find them more enemies. If I wanted to show up in Cafe and, you know, potentially vassalize Cafe, that too would be an option. I think some kind of system of being able to teleport to vassals would be great, and people in factions not being afraid to declare war on you, even though you have a lot of vassals, would also be great. So there's some improvements with campaign AI with respect to that could be made, but overall the system is freaking fantastic. Just some balancing issues, but the brilliant aspects here of making a race, a faction work with limited territory, limited economy, and having that nomadic playstyle, if you will, on offer is great. Like, you with Kislev or dwarves, you have the regular Total War style working out. With ogres, you have a hybrid model, because you can have settlements, you can have economy from settlements, hero capacity, or you can just say screw it to all that and just focus on camps. With Khorne, you do have settlements, few in numbers, but mainly you do have armies on the move, going around the world, beating the crap out of people. Again, it would be great for other armies to have more flexibility in terms of teleportation, not just your legendary lord being teleported by cults, but still a freaking fantastic system all the same. Kostin, signing out.